But now it's time for the meat.
For the deep dive.
The deep dive.
Doing immigration today, which I'm very excited about. I think we should start with laying out what current immigration policy is, and then maybe current rhetoric, and then we get into our ideas.
I love it.
So, current immigration policy, so the main way that people immigrate here is with a green card, okay? There are a few different ways to get a green card. The most popular one is by having a relative in the United States. That is enough to get you a green card to come here. Another one is a relative who is a United States citizen and in the United States, I believe. Another one is by having or being highly skilled in some sector, some industry, and so we will give green cards to people with skills that we value, who we want as part of the economy. Besides that, there is a lottery, which allows, I think, somewhere in the tens of thousands of people in every year. That lottery has millions of people apply. You have a very low likelihood of getting in, but it goes to people from countries who are not members of the biggest immigrant countries into the U.S. So it's not people from Mexico. It's often people from sub-Saharan African countries who come here via that lottery.
Okay.
That is it. And a major point that I'm going to make right now is that a low-skilled worker without family in America is very clearly not represented by any of those options.
He's not given an option, right? He has no way in. No way in.
Exactly.
And that is encouraging illegal immigration.
Totally.
Because without giving them an option to get into the country or a path to do it, America is the land of opportunity. He's going to find his way in because he knows that his life here is going to be better than wherever he's coming from. And he's going to do whatever he can to get here. And that's encouraging more illegal immigration by not giving them that legal path.
Exactly.
And I think it's important that we grease the wheels to make it as easy as possible. Yeah. From my perspective, I think it's important to grease the wheels to make it as easy as possible for people to get into the country.
Yeah.
So that we don't have to deal with an illegal immigrant problem. We can just have immigrants. It won't be a problem anymore.
Exactly.
And so then that's when this gets more into why should we have immigration? Why shouldn't we have immigration?
Yeah, and honestly, I actually think it's better that we talk about why we should.
Okay.
First, I think that makes more sense.
Okay.
So there are plenty of reasons. I think the most obvious argument against I could think about would be that immigrants take Americans' jobs, right? And so because of that, you would expect to see job losses for natives, and you would expect to see wage decreases for natives because there are more people competing with those jobs. But the truth is, at least based on a paper that I read from the National Bureau of Economic Research, that more illegal immigrants, first of all, more illegal immigrants is better for lower skilled workers.
More legal?
Illegal.
Okay.
So we'll start with illegal.
Yeah.
Then we'll talk about legalization.
Yeah, let's do that.
Because first of all, it creates more jobs by ramping up production.
Exactly.
And they're not actually competing with the native population for the jobs.
Right. They're competing for two totally separate jobs.
Exactly. So these illegal immigrants they're working in farm jobs. They're working in construction. And they're being paid wages that are often so low that natives don't want to take them. And so it allows corporations to work in this gray zone where they don't even have to pay a minimum wage, or at least a fair market wage for these illegal immigrants.
Yeah.
But they still get the production, which is going to create higher level jobs for natives.
And if you're concerned about illegal immigrants bringing down wages, you don't want the illegal immigrant to be able to operate under the table like this.
Yeah.
You would want them to have to compete on the same minimum wage front as you, right?
Exactly.
Because you don't want to have to compete with a guy who's going to take $4 an hour. You don't want to have to compete with that.
Yes.
And so that's where, fixing this immigration problem is so important, right? So I have read papers that suggest that the initial wage shock could be present.
Yeah.
With new workers, just an initial wage shock. But over time, firms will increase investment due to the expanded economic demand that's coming from these illegal immigrants who now have capital to spend in the American economy.
Yeah.
Right. Something I was looking at was talking about the log capital labor, the capital labor ratio. And the capital labor ratio is always reverting back to this 1940, 1980 trend. And it's like a law of economics where you're going to have this, when you increase the amount of workers, you're also increasing the amount of capital that can go into reinvesting because you're increasing the output completely.
Yep.
Right? So these wage problems aren't really that much of an issue. There are two big studies that are done on this, and one of them is from Octaviano and Perry. Their study showed that there are only positive impacts for Native workers among all education groups. Borjas disagreed slightly. Borjas is a very prominent immigration economist. He saw that there was a negative impact for non-educated Native workers of 1.7% downward pressure on wages for non-high school educated workers. Non-high school educated Native workers are becoming more and more of a small population in the United States. So we're talking about a very, very minute amount of Native workers getting negatively impacted in their wages, also only by 1.7%.
Yeah, and this is disputed because I found a paper that said that it actually increases wages for lower skilled workers. So Borjas, I do know he is a reputed researcher in the field, but it's possible that immigration actually doesn't have any negative economic effects.
Right. It's possible it doesn't have any.
Yeah.
But I do think it's interesting that the range of studies I've seen have actually been like 1.7% positive impact for non-high school educated workers. And then Borjas finds a negative 1.7% impact for non-high school educated workers. If you average it out, it's zero, no impact. So I feel like that's kind of a good sentiment of where the research is currently at.
Yeah.
It's basically like inconclusive, really nothing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I read a study and I took poor notes on it, which is going to screw up this conversation. But it proposed 3 or 4 policies for dealing with illegal immigrants. And there were 3 that had to do with deportation, to do with letting them stay here illegally. And then the last one modeled legalizing all the immigrants currently in the country.
Yeah.
And that was the only policy option that raised wages for everyone, including the low-skilled Native workers. Because it's just like you said, you don't want to be competing with the person who can get paid less than you.
Yeah.
Right? And who will do the work happily because they're still getting paid less than they would get in their country.
Exactly.
So on the economic front, for me, at least...
we're only on the wages part.
True.
There are other aspects of the economy too.
True.
Right? So on the wages front, I think this is great news.
Yes.
Right?
Me too.
Now we can go to productivity.
Okay.
Productivity is the next topic of the economy. Of the top 50 venture capital firms, half of them had at least one immigrant founder, and 3/4 of them had immigrants as top management or research positions. Many STEM degrees that are being pursued in the United States currently are from foreign students. Native population in the United States right now is not pursuing STEM degrees in the ways that they should be. Foreign students are. They're coming to the United States to pursue these STEM degrees, and that's where the innovation and productivity comes from. And that's what grows the economy more than anything, right?
Yeah. Yeah. What I have immigrants represent 16% of inventors in the U.S., but produce 23% of the innovative output and 36% of aggregate innovation when accounting for spillover to natives, because that's a huge part of this too. Immigrants are bringing more ideas across our borders. They are the people responsible for the knowledge transfer that we benefit so much from. Yeah. So we want more of that, not less.
Yeah. And these immigrants are actually, I found, produce patents at double the rate as natives.
Yeah.
And so this is all areas where especially highly educated illegal immigrants are what we need to be sucking the world of right now. We need to be sucking these people in from everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I think getting into our geopolitical conversations with China, as we do all the time, we have a lot of Chinese foreign students that come in and study in the United States, but then have a hard time staying in the United States and have to go back to China. Why would we do that? Why would we educate these workers and then let them leave? We should educate them and then want to keep them here for as long as possible so that they can innovate here and make their patents here.
Yes.
And be part of our economy and our community.
Exactly.
We should be in the business of that.
Yeah. I'm with you.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say is states with higher concentrations of foreign-born workers actually experience faster rates of productivity growth. So for productivity, check. Immigrants are good. Wages, check /
Mm-hmm.
We're still pretty good.
Yeah.
Fiscal impact. So on a federal level, so fiscal impact, like budgetary stuff with governments, right? On a federal level, immigrants I have are positive.
I have that too.
But it can be different for state and local governments.
I have that too.
Okay.
Yeah. So for federal, because immigrants usually, and we talked about this a little bit before the episode, they're usually not the people who are a big burden on the entitlements programs like Social Security, Medicare, because immigrants tend to be younger people.
Right.
However, where they are costly is by educating their children.
Right.
So because they're usually...
Which they're likely to have more of the natives.
Yes. And they're usually, especially illegal immigrants, they're low-wage workers most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not paying as much into the system via taxes, and the system is spending a lot on educating their kids.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's all I have.
Okay. I have...
Yeah.
You pretty much nailed it. But I'll say like the proportion of the ages that are coming into the country through illegal means are non-citizens. We have 25% are between the ages of 25 and 34. We have about 25% between the ages of 35 and 44. So these are prime age workers, prime productivity workers, and prime consumers.
Yes.
That are coming here. Small amounts of children, 0 to 14. 0 to 14, we have 5% non-citizens.
Oh, that surprises me.
It surprises me, but I think that 25 and 34 having children will bump that up as the years go on. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But so from the perspective of benefit or impact to Social Security, I've heard arguments that say that it will drain 1.7 trillion additional dollars from our government if we choose to let these illegal immigrants stay and fold in, become citizens. It'll cost $1.7 trillion. That number is very disputed. That's a really hard calculation to make. It takes a lot of assumptions, and I really only found it from one source, but that one source was published 5 times in 5 different websites.
Okay.
That's not stuff you want to see.
No.
You never want to see that.
Yeah, that sounds like they're plucking something that's going to get a lot of eyeballs.
And even when I looked at the math behind it, it didn't look good.
Okay.
It did not look good, but this is what he came to. I take issue with that because the people who will be paying in, so these 25 to 50-year-olds, which is basically where the immigrants are going to be paying into Social Security, but not really taking out of Social Security yet. And our issue with Social Security is that there are too many baby boomers going into retirement, and we don't have the necessary funds in our Social Security program to keep it totally solvent in the coming like 2 decades to its full degree. We should do a show on that sometime. But by legalizing these workers, we could have an influx of money going to these programs from people that aren't necessarily taking out yet. And by the time that these illegal immigrants gray out, retire, we will have a new generation of Americans ready to subsidize their retirement.
Yeah.
And so I feel like this is the perfect opportunity to fix our baby boomer retirement crisis by getting these people to pay into Social Security and Medicare now as much as possible.
Yeah, I think it works even more because of the demographic specifics that have gotten us into this pickle with Social Security. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much all I have on the economy. But
no, that's pretty
much
much
the overall big picture here, and anyone I think who's studied any economics and who has learned about demographics, I feel like this stuff has been all over the news recently, knows that people tend to be good for an economy.
Yeah, people are actually a good thing.
Yeah, you want producers and consumers.
Yeah.
Like that kind of makes you grow. So the question, of course, with all these good things, even though we mentioned a few,
I'm going to say one more good thing.
Okay.
One more good thing.
Yeah.
There's just a good case study here. When there was a massive influx of Cubans in southern Florida, massive influx. Like we're talking counties that grew by like 10, 20% overnight with population. People were expecting an economic crisis. The place flourished like 2 years later, like flourished. A lot of economic growth, a lot of opportunity. And that's just a great showcase of how immigrants are good for an economy, not bad.
I like that.
So now, why do people hate immigrants?
And there's a list of reasons. One thing that immediately comes to my mind is, look at the strain on government resources because of what are happening in these cities, in these sanctuary cities. Look at what's happening in Chicago and how they're having to house all these immigrants in churches or in high schools. And they just weren't ready at all. I think it's a valid concern.
Yeah.
And I think the answer is not that we need to shut down immigration. It's that we need a better structure for legal immigration.
Definitely.
I think that's kind of my bottom line, and I'll come back to that with every complaint that there is. But if we made it easier for people to immigrate, made it legal for people to immigrate with low skills, right? Gave channels for companies to communicate to these potential labor markets that are outside the country, and made it straightforward for them to sign up and come. So one, it's going to be easier for the immigrants because they're not going to have to like treacherously cross their countries and try to cross the border and always fear deportation.
Or pay for a cartel to smuggle them through.
Exactly. Yeah. And cities, local governments won't have to spend a bunch of money putting them up because they'll know that these people are coming in with jobs. It solves all the problems there.
Yeah, it's about greasing the wheels to get them in here as smooth as possible.
Do you worry at all? One thing that I think about with that is if these immigrants can't work for less than the minimum wage, will that ruin their employment prospects?
I don't know. But also I don't know if I care. Okay. I don't know if I care about that. Because I can definitely concede that sometimes unionizing a specific workforce could actually make it more difficult to hire them.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I'm going to be anti-union.
I'm not, I don't know. I go back and forth because I've also thought, I was thinking about this with globalization recently. So one of the reasons we talk about globalization, this is a tangent, is because all of these jobs went overseas. These manufacturing jobs.
Yeah.
Why did they go overseas? Because labor was cheaper there.
Yeah.
Right? One, means you can make the argument that those jobs would have stayed here without a minimum wage. Two, even if you say that, maybe it means that the jobs are necessarily going to the people who need them the most. They might not be going to Americans, but if we're taking this from a globalist perspective instead of a nationalist perspective, it might actually be a good thing. And that's why globalization has brought millions, maybe probably billions out of poverty.
Well, that's why that's like the Indian economic progress over the last decade. Just the last decade has been amazing because of the switch from people going from sustenance farming to industrial farming or industrial farming / industrial labor, right? Yeah. That switch is so immeasurably powerful in raising your standard of living that globalization in a lot of these countries is the best thing for them.
Yeah.
And so us having, what are you suggesting?
I mean, I don't know if I'm suggesting a lower minimum wage or if I'm suggesting we're just okay with jobs leaving to globalization. I mean, no member of the U.S. government, I guess, should be, because they're here to represent U.S. citizens, and those jobs going to other countries are specifically hurting U.S. citizens. But in that case, like, it seems that lowering the minimum wage might be smarter because it would incentivize more jobs to be here.
I feel like that would hurt the standard of living for Americans, though. Obviously.
Yes, I think so too. And the thing is, there's been other literature that raising the minimum wage actually wouldn't raise unemployment.
Yeah. we should do a deep dive on that too. There's plenty of studies that show that minimum wage increases, if done correctly, have no impacts on employment at all.
Yeah. But I don't know. Bringing it back to immigration, right?
I think there is no way that you could lower the American minimum wage that would make it acceptable to an American to you can't equal the labor cost of a Mexican laborer and an American laborer that American will be able to keep up with living in the U.S. economy.
I think
there's no way to do that.
Yeah, I think that's true. Even if the minimum wage is, say it's raised, say it goes to $15, and I think these companies are more likely to get Mexican immigrants to work the farms for $15 an hour than they are to get Native American citizens.
Yes, I agree. But and a lot of Americans blame illegal immigrants for taking their jobs and lowering their wages, but that's just not what we see.
Yeah, the data doesn't support it.
So right now, I think the big one is crime. A lot of people blame illegal immigrants for American crime. Mm-hmm. And the data I've seen just does not show that at all. So the first thing I read was the study from the Marshall Project. It was a fairly back-of-the-hand calculation that I didn't really agree with the total of the methodology, but it paints an all right picture. It shows trends from 2007 to 2016 with their plotting the amount of illegal immigrants in the area and crime. And they find that even though illegal immigrants are increasing in all of these areas, crime is not necessarily increasing alongside it. There's actually a slight decrease. There could be a ton of reasons why they're decreasing, though, and they don't account for those. They don't account for maybe these cities are in blue districts or red districts. They don't account for guns per capita. They're not accounting for a lot of things. They're not accounting for education spending per capita. They're only accounting for immigrants. So I don't agree with that formulation at all. But it at least paints the general picture that crime is not exploding because of illegal immigrants. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I found a paper on illegal immigration and crime in Texas.
Is this from the Cato Institute?
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. We've read the same one.
Yeah. So the results that they have here is that actually native-born Americans commit more crimes by far than any types of immigrants.
By far.
1,422 crimes per 100,000 native-born Americans versus 782 for illegal immigrants versus 535 for legal immigrants.
So our country would be safer full of illegal immigrants than native-born Americans, right?
Yeah, which honestly, probably not that surprising.
Yeah.
And also, I could imagine an immediate reaction to that number being like, oh, well, illegal immigrants are committing more violent crimes. But no, they thought about that. And this pattern holds for all specific types of crimes: violent crimes, property crimes, homicide, sex crimes. It is always native-born Americans commit the most, then illegal immigrants, then legal immigrants.
And I just think and one of the reasons, obviously, is illegal immigrants have way more to lose if they get caught doing anything.
Yeah.
Because they'll be threatened with deportation, right? Mm-hmm. So that makes a lot of sense while they're less.
Yeah.
And for legal immigrants, I feel like legal immigrants will feel as though they have something to prove in their community as that they belong and that they're able to assimilate. Mm-hmm. And so there's a pressure for them to not commit crimes. I just think it's insane that this can exist. And then we can also have a news media that is talking to so much of our population, pushing down their throats that illegal immigrants are the cause of all these problems. And it's just not happening.
It's not true. Exactly.
I've talked about this with some conservative people in my circle, and they say, okay, illegal immigrants might not commit more crimes than natives, but an illegal immigrant committing one crime at all is too many because they shouldn't have been here in the first place. And I'm like, well, that's just not how any of this works.
No.
Because we're talking about that. Like, it's just not how it works. The country is safer if more people are in it, and then less people get hurt, like per the population, right?
Yeah.
It's like a per capita versus gross number misunderstanding that's hard to get through. I see that. That's actually like something that I've dealt with a lot talking to people of different political opinions, is just trying to get them to understand what per capita means. Have you had that experience?
No.
literally all the time. I just try to teach people what the term per capita means, or like trying to adjust things per sizes of a population.
Yeah.
And they just can't understand why.
Well, to me, the way to explain this would be, okay, so some of the victims of crimes, if illegal immigrants are here, are going to be illegal immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not just that the crimes committed by illegal immigrants could be hurting U.S. natives. It's that now some of the crimes committed by U.S. natives will hurt illegal immigrants instead of hurting other U.S. natives.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would probably say to that person, does that fix your worries, fix your concerns?
And they probably say no.
Yeah.
But this is one of those things where it's very easy to be anti-illegal immigrants. It's very easy. They broke the law. Get out of the country. You broke the law. But when they're committing less crimes than you, I mean...
and they're helping the economy.
And they're helping the economy. What are you going to say to that?
Yeah.
And that's just what sucks. And so with this constant explosion of anti-immigrant rhetoric, Ron DeSantis, who is currently running for president, has taken it upon himself to pass a very, very, very powerful anti-immigration law that does the following in Florida. It requires hospitals to collect information on immigrant status if the hospital receives Medicaid funding. It puts in place of penalties for hiring undocumented workers. It expands online employment verification screenings, requiring to all employers with over 25 employees. Invalidates out-of-state driver's licenses to undocumented immigrants. Establishes criminal penalties for transporting undocumented immigrants. Increases the funding to relocate or bus migrants to other parts of the United States. It expands the authority of Florida Department of Law Enforcement to carry out immigration enforcement, and employers are not allowed to provide ID cards for those who can't provide citizenship. 2 of these would have been an extreme bill. All of them together is
the most extreme immigration bill we've ever seen.
This on a national scale would be insanity.
Yeah.
This on a national scale would be insanity. The fact that he's talking about, one of the things that I think are so dangerous right off the bat, laws requiring hospitals to collect information of immigration status. So many illegal immigrants will not be going to the doctor anymore because they're afraid that they're going to get their cards and their papers checked and they're going to get kicked out of the country. Mm-hmm. That's going to have massive negative impacts on the health of our people. The American Medical Association suggests avoiding this type of legislation at all costs, and it's exactly what Ron DeSantis has done.
Yeah.
On top of that, Florida is in a massive labor shortage. They currently have an unemployment rate of 2.6% and have only 0.4% unemployed people for each job opening. That's one of the lowest in the nation. The best in the nation is New York at 0.9.
Okay.
So for every open job, there are only 0.4 unemployed people.
Okay.
Meaning that it's just so tight.
Yeah.
And now, non-citizen immigrants, which are 8% of Florida's population and 11% of Florida's overall workforce, are now going to be directly discriminated against in the workplace.
Yeah, and they're afraid to go into work because this E-Verify system means that if they go into work and they're caught, they get deported.
They're de-incentivizing economic activity, and they're incentivizing these immigrants to leave. Mm-hmm. And there are specific sectors of the economy that are going to be massively negative affected. So Florida has a huge agricultural sector, right? Well, 37% of agricultural workers are non-citizens. 37% of them. You're going to tell me that you're going to get rid of 37% of an industry's workforce and there aren't going to be massive consequences? You're high if you think that. There are going to be massive consequences to this, and he doesn't see it.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't see it. Other things. Construction, 24%. Service, 14%. Transportation, 14%. Florida needs to have a construction boom because of the absolute housing nightmare that Florida is in.
Yeah, not to mention hurricane season every year. You need to fix things across the board every year.
Instantly.
Yeah.
And you're going to try to get rid of a quarter of the workforce? I mean, why would you do that? Why would you do that?
Well, the answer, of course, is pure xenophobia.
Massive xenophobia.
I think.
It's all it is.
And that's what, most of the immigration rhetoric is. I mean, there's they're going to take our jobs, but it's generally just we don't want people who didn't grow up here.
Mm-hmm. They just don't think that they can assimilate / coexist. And you're wrong if you think that. You're just wrong.
And it's a perfect, to me, it's a perfect conservative talking point.
Yeah.
Because they love, and I think politicians in general love to do this, because it's not politically viable to criticize America for our own problems, right? But Trump is like the perfect example of criticizing the other.
Yeah.
Right? And illegal immigrants are just a perfect example for that.
And we're talking there's about 10 million illegal immigrants in the country. 10.2 million is the number I got.
Yeah.
What is that? 3% of the population?
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying all of our problems are because of 3% of the population? If we had more of them, crime would be lower and wages would be up.
Yeah.
So, the only issue is your xenophobia.
Yes.
And that's the point that I think we really want to get across here is the economic impacts of immigration are only positive. The population effects are only positive. Mm-hmm. Having more people is a good thing.
Yeah.
We are talking about China graying out and having too many old people. If America wants to beat that and beat that international trend, we need more people of working age who are going to be able to contribute to our entitlement programs now.
Because our demographics are also we're not getting younger.
Right.
Our population is getting older. We're not as bad as a China or a Russia, but our workforce is getting smaller and we can use this economic development. Now, something that I really want to harp on here is how much of a political liability it is to talk favorably about immigration, because even on the Democrat side, most people will say that they favor more control at the border. Mm-hmm. There's this general idea that immigration is bad and that we need more border control. And that exists on the Democrat side as well. The only difference is that on the Democrat side, it's less of a prominent thing. It's more loudly communicated on the Republican side. Mm-hmm. And I think we'll lead the charge in this show. We've read articles about it. The solution is not to out more illegal immigrants. It's to make a more robust legal immigration system.
Yes.
It's going to help everyone across the board. It's going to, and if we can have a little bit of compassion and you can think about how much it's going to help the people who are actually coming into our country, that it's likely that there is no better effect that something can have on a poor person's life than moving from a poor country to a rich country.
The perfect anti-poverty program is moving to America.
Literally.
That's the anti-poverty program from heaven right there.
Yeah. So we just need to harp on that. The one other thing I want to talk about is drug trade.
Yes. If we talked about immigration without talking about the drug trade, we would be doing a disservice.
Yes. So there's this idea that we can maybe stop fentanyl. I think you talked about the fentanyl crisis.
Yeah, I talked about the fentanyl crisis probably 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think it's one of the biggest problems in America right now.
Yeah. Over 70,000 Americans die every year from fentanyl overdoses. I think there was one drug bust where there was enough fentanyl.
Yeah, we talked about this 3 weeks ago. Enough to kill every single person in the country.
50 times.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a huge problem, basically, and it comes from precursors that are exported from China to the cartels in Mexico who make the fentanyl in their labs, and they smuggle it up here. Now, there are people who think that sealing the border could prevent fentanyl from coming in. And we want to talk about why we think that is specifically wrong.
Totally wrong.
So, fentanyl is so potent that a dose of 2 milligrams can kill you. 2 milligrams is 2 milligrams. I'm trying to think.
How would you even explain what 2 milligrams is like?
How 10 grams is remarkably easy to smuggle in a car. Mm-hmm. To not be found despite a routine check. And the thing is, even if the border is sealed, you have to think there are people that are just driving from San Diego down into Mexico for vacation. So there are still a bunch of roads coming in and out, right, of the southern border.
Yeah.
And at those roads, sure, you do have customs officers checking these cars, but they don't have the technology or the capability to possibly find the fentanyl that's going through those checkpoints.
And so most of the fentanyl that's coming into the country is coming through the checkpoint systems.
Yes.
They're going through these custom officers. They're not getting smuggled across the Rio Grande. That's not what's happening.
And the Rio Grande is where the illegal immigrants are coming from.
Right. Right. So they're not coming with the illegal immigrants.
Yeah.
They're coming through the custom offices. And they're coming through the custom offices, and we need to find better ways to identify the fentanyl at those points of entry. And I will be massively in favor of increasing funding for the border control agencies so that they can better find the fentanyl in any way possible at these points of entry.
This is where I probably have a controversial view that, and honestly, we could do a deep dive into here. I don't know if it's worth spending resources on that.
You don't think?
I legitimately think the cartel will always be way better funded than anything we try. And I think that we might just be throwing money into a sinkhole.
And they'll just find a way around it.
They'll always find a way around it. And I think the resources will be better spent if we accept that fentanyl will come to the country and we try to fix the root causes of people using drugs and treating those who are using.
I don't think that's a controversial opinion at all. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think you can totally see a reality where it's actually more fiscally beneficial to treat fentanyl as a disease rather than trying to cut it off at the source, because there's no way to actually cut it off because you can never succeed.
No.
I don't know what the numbers are, and I would have to see, but I'm definitely currently in favor of doing whatever's possible to stop fentanyl coming in. But it needs to be done right. It's not, the answer is not a border wall, people. It's not that, because that's not where fentanyl comes from. No. A wall is not going to stop fentanyl when it's basically driving around whatever wall you're going to build up anyway.
Yeah. No, a wall, especially after learning what we have about illegal immigration, a wall is probably the biggest waste of money that I could imagine.
Yeah.
The government spending.
I can't think of a bigger waste of money than that.
Yeah. Because it's not only wasting money, it's actively hurting our economy.
You're actually missing out on potential money.
Yes.
It's like the worst investment. It's a negative investment.
And to me, that just really highlights how xenophobic the American public, and specifically the conservative side of the American public, is, because there's such resonance in the rhetoric for building a wall.
I know. But what's crazy is we read this paper from the Cato Institute. Cato Institute is a massively right-wing organization.
But libertarian. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So they're right-wing, but they're
purely economically right-wing.
Right. They're purely, which is like, okay, you make economic sense here with all of this research. It's awesome. So, and now they're having an issue. I think, honestly, the Cato Institute people, the fact that they're putting out this study showing that crime is not a big problem among illegal immigrants, it's like they're trying to prove to their own, guys, stop being so xenophobic, please.
Yeah. Because
of all these economic benefits, we need to be taking advantage of it. And there's been movements to do immigration reform in this country. In 2013, there was a group called the Gang of Eight in the Senate that put up a whole immigration bill. And Marco Rubio was actually spearheading a lot of the legislation. A massive Republican from Florida. I think it was a newcomer at the time, or at least relatively new. And Republicans shit all over it. Sean Hannity, who was initially for the immigration bill, ended up getting hate from his audience and had to go against the bill afterwards.
Really?
And there was Fox News, when it was coming out, was in favor of the immigration bill. After it got pushed back from the audience, the rhetoric on Fox News changed.
Wow. I mean, that does make sense as far as Fox News. It does make me think, if Democrats were more vocal about being pro-immigration, could they win some of these libertarian votes?
I totally think they could.
When I think about a libertarian, right, they're Republican only because of the economics, right? But this, to me, doesn't seem like this is an economic issue that the Democrats could totally take up.
Completely take up.
Yeah.
And look, what we're saying is we don't want more illegal immigration. As Ben said already, we want better and easier ways to do legal immigration.
Yes.
We want you to be able to get in here pending specific background checks and issues with national security. You can come into this country, get a social security card, start paying your taxes, and become a member of America from day one.
Exactly.
That's what we want. We want you to be a paying member of our society, contributing to our economy, and we want you to be our neighbor.
Yeah. And one thing I'll say in addition to this is the illegal immigrants currently here should be legalized.
Totally.
As well.
Everyone should be granted citizenship.
Pending the same background check.
Pending the same background checks.
Yeah.
Yes, I am totally in favor of all that. We've read other studies talking about the benefits of amnesty too, but that's too much information. Point is, amnesty is a good thing. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let them stay here legally.
Let them stay here legally. Let them just keep doing what they're doing, guys.
Yeah, they're good for us. So please believe us. And libertarians and Democrats become vocal about this. And libertarians are already mostly, as far as I know, on the Democrat side as far as social politics.
Yeah.
So let's give them an economic bone to chew on.
And this is like less of a compromise and more of a common understanding.
Exactly.
Right. It's less of a compromise and being like, oh wait, we both agree on the exact same thing. There's no compromise necessary.
Yeah.
I don't like I hate when there's open borders rhetoric, or like when there's questions on the debate stage. During the 2020 primary for the Democrats, Bernie Sanders was talking about Medicare for all, and he was asked, "Do you think illegal immigrants will be covered under Medicare for all?" And he said, "Yes, that's the right answer." But that is an answer that is like the moral and correct policy. But the best answer is, in my administration, there will be no illegal immigrant because we will push for amnesty and make sure that they are paying taxes effectively and are not undercutting American workers in wage negotiations and are not taking advantage of American systems and making sure that they pay their taxes.
Yeah.
That's what you have to say.
Exactly. It's almost like they're just scared that it's too complex.
Right.
They're scared that Americans can't get past the idea of they want to let more others in.
And they can't get past that.
No.
America's had issues like this in the past. We've had the Chinese Exclusion Act where we made it illegal for Asians to immigrate to America. We were very anti-Irish. We were anti-Italian. We are now anti-Mexican. It's going to switch to some other at some point again soon. You know what I mean?
We need to stop this wheel from turning.
Yes, exactly.